Frost on the porch boards. Bare feet anyway. Marlene Cutshaw carries two 5-gallon buckets down the sagging steps, steam curling off the kibble mash inside. The sound reaches the tree line before she does a low, rolling hum like wind through a hollow log, except it isn't wind. It's cats. They come out of the fescue, out of the woodpile, out of the collapsed corn crib, gray ones, orange ones, three-legged ones, one missing an eye. 60-some pairs of eyes catch the porch light. She calls each one by name, not Kitty, not here, names Colonel, Pepper Jack, Widow Suggins. The bowls go down in rows, straight as fence posts, though nobody taught her to line them up that way. Somewhere past the barn, a truck slows on the county road, headlights sweeping the yard, then speeding up again, like the driver didn't want to be caught looking. Marlene doesn't flinch. She kneels in the frozen grass, lets a torn-eared tom rub against her knuckles, and murmurs something too soft for the wind to carry off. Every soul in Sable County agrees on one thing: Marlene Cutshaw has gone soft in the head. What none of them can explain is where she's finding the money to feed 60 cats, when she can't afford to feed herself. Before we get to what Marlene was really building out there in the frost, and trust me, it is worth every minute, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and drop a comment letting me know what part of the world you're watching from tonight. This channel runs on stories like hers, and it runs on folks like you sticking around to hear them through. Piney Fork sits at the bottom of Sable County, Kentucky, where the ridges fold in so tight the sun doesn't clear the tree line till near 9 in the morning. It's the kind of place where the feed store still runs a tab, and everybody knows whose truck is whose by the sound of the engine alone. Marlene had lived on the Cutshaw home place her whole life. 41 acres her grandfather cleared with a mule, now grown up in broom sedge and blackberry cane. Her husband, Denny, had passed 3 winters back, heart trouble, quick and cruel. Left her the land, a leaking roof, and a stack of medical bills that never seemed to shrink no matter how much she chipped at them cleaning houses in town. Her daughter, Winona, 17 and sharp-tongued, still remembers the exact sound of the day everything tipped. Not a crash, just her mother's chair scraping back from the kitchen table, quiet, after opening an envelope from the county. Winona used to sit on the porch rail some evenings and watch her mother move among the cats like a woman counting rosary beads, murmuring their names, checking paws for burrs, dabbing salve on torn ears with a Q-tip. It looked, Winona admitted to her best friend, like grief wearing work gloves. It started with one cat, a half-starved calico that showed up during the funeral week, crying at the kitchen door like it, too, had lost someone. Marlene fed her. Word got around the way it does in a county that small that the Cutshaw place would take in anything that showed up hungry. So they came, dumped from truck beds on the county line after dark, left in cardboard boxes by the mailbox with no note. Marlene never once said no. By the second year, the number had climbed past 60. She fed them from a mix of her own grocery money, church donation bins, and a standing arrangement with the Piney Fork Kroger to take their expired cans off the loading dock before they hit the dumpster. Her neighbor, Ferris Odom, a retired lineman who'd known her since she was in pigtails, took to shaking his head at the fence line. "Marlene," he told her one October morning, leaning on a post, "a woman can love a thing too much for her own good. You're gonna feed yourself right into the poorhouse." She only smiled and kept scooping. "Ferris," she said, "these creatures never once let me down. Can't say the same about people." He had no answer for that. He just watched her walk back toward the barn, 60 shadows trailing behind her like she was Moses parting a sea of fur, and figured there wasn't any reasoning with grief once it decided to take the shape of kindness. What nobody in Piney Fork understood, because Marlene never told a soul, was that she wasn't just feeding cats. She was building something. Every evening after the bowls were filled, she disappeared into the old corn crib with a hammer, a coffee can of bent nails, and lumber salvaged from a tobacco barn 2 families over that had finally given up and fallen down. She measured by eye. She sawed by lantern light. Slowly, board by board, the crib was becoming something else entirely. Walls insulated with scavenged foam, a row of small entry holes cut low along the base, shelving built in tiers like church pews. Winona found her out there one night in February, sawdust in her hair, breath fogging in the cold. "Mama, what in the world are you doing?" Marlene didn't look up from her measuring tape. Building them a winter house, a real one, heated water bowls, insulated walls, a sick bay for the ones that need doctoring. She tapped a rough sketch pen to a rafter, a floor plan drawn in pencil, labeled in her own careful hand. Intake, quarantine, adoption room. Winona stared at her mother like she'd never seen her before. "You're building a whole shelter, out here, by yourself." "Somebody has to," Marlene said. She'd learned trap neuter return off library computer printouts. She taught herself basic vet care from second-hand textbooks bought for $1 at the church rummage sale. She kept records, real records, in a spiral notebook of every cat's name, age, temperament, medical history. It wasn't neglect dressed up as devotion. It was a rescue operation, built from nothing, by a widow with a hammer and a grudge against giving up. But building a sanctuary costs money, and money was the one thing Marlene Cutshaw did not have. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, county seal stamped in the corner. Sable County Animal Control, acting on multiple neighbor complaints, was issuing a formal citation. Unlicensed operation of an unregulated animal facility, in violation of County Ordinance 14B. Fines would accrue daily until the property was brought into compliance, or the animals removed. Failure to pay would result in a lien against the Cutshaw property, with a public auction of the land to satisfy the debt. 30 days. That was the clock now ticking over Marlene's head. Sheriff's Deputy Gentry Hobbs delivered the follow-up notice himself, hat in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ms. Cutshaw, I don't make the rules, but somebody called this in and the county's got to act on it. 30 days or they start the process on your land." "Who called it in?" Marlene asked, though she already had a guess. Gentry just shook his head and wouldn't say. "Didn't have to. Half the county had a truck that slowed down and sped up past her yard at night." Marlene did the only thing she knew how to do. She worked harder. She drove 2 counties over to find a low-cost spay-and-neuter clinic willing to come out on a Saturday. She called every rescue group in the phone book, begging for a fostering lifeline for even a dozen cats, to shrink the number the county was so worked up about. She sold Denny's old truck, the one she'd sworn she'd never part with, and put every dollar toward permits and fencing. For 3 weeks, it looked like it might just work. Then the well pump failed. No warning, just a groan, a sputter and silence. No water for the animals, no water for the house, no water to mix the feed. The repair estimate came in at $1,100 she didn't have, on top of everything else. Marlene sat on the porch steps that night, notebook of names open on her knee. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself cry where nobody could see her, except 60 cats, who gathered close and said nothing, the way good company sometimes does. Ferris found her there the next morning, hauling water in milk jugs from his own well, 3 trips before breakfast, saying nothing about it, just setting the jugs down and walking back for more. "Didn't say I agreed with you," he muttered when she finally thanked him. "Said I wasn't gonna watch you lose the place over it." It wasn't much, but it was enough to get her through the week, and something in Marlene's chest loosened a notch, the way frozen ground gives when the thaw finally comes. With 11 days left on the county's clock, Marlene made a decision. She couldn't raise the fine money in time, but she could finish the shelter, could prove, in front of God and Sable County both, that this wasn't chaos. It was a system. It was care. She worked past midnight for a week straight, hanging the last of the insulation, painting a hand-lettered sign for the door. Piney Fork Stray Haven. Winona skipped 2 days of school to help, hauling lumber, holding the flashlight, learning her mother's handwriting on the intake forms. On the 28th day the storm came. Not just rain, a wall of it, the kind that turned Sable County's creeks into brown, roaring rivers inside an hour. The power went first. Then somewhere near midnight Marlene woke to a sound that wasn't thunder. It was the cats, every one of them, screaming at once, hurling themselves against the farmhouse windows and door. A wall of fur and noise that would not stop, would not be soothed, would not let her sleep through whatever they already knew was coming. She smelled it before she understood it. Gas. The old propane line to the water heater, buried and rusted since Denny's father's time, had sheared loose somewhere under the flooding yard. It was leaking into the crawlspace beneath the house, beneath Winona's bedroom. Marlene didn't think. She grabbed her daughter, got them both out into the rain, and only then understood what the cats had been screaming about for the better part of 20 minutes. By the time the volunteer fire department reached the end of the washed-out lane, Ferris had waded a mile through rising water to flag them down. Sable County's only news van was already rolling in behind them, drawn by scanner chatter about a gas leak and flash flooding. What the camera caught wasn't just two women shivering in ponchos. It was 60 cats, soaked and matted, still circled tight around the porch where they dragged their humans to safety, refusing to scatter even as the fire crew moved through. The footage ran on the 11 o'clock broadcast out of Lexington, then got picked up online by morning. A shelter woman's rescue cats had saved her life. Somewhere 3 states away, a man named Thaddeus Kingsolver, watching from a hospital recliner during a slow night of insomnia, sat up straight at something in the corner of the frame. A scarred gray tom, one eye clouded, wearing a faded pink collar with a tag too worn to read on camera, but he didn't need to read it. He'd bought that collar himself, for a cat his late daughter had lost 7 years back, 3 counties from where he'd been living then. He drove down himself 2 days later, no assistant, no warning, just a rental car pulling slow up the washed gravel lane. He found Marlene in the yard, gas line freshly capped, hanging blankets to dry on a fence line strung between 2 fence posts. He didn't introduce himself as anyone important. He just asked, quiet, if he could see the gray cat with the pink collar. When she brought Pepper Jack out, Thaddeus Kingsolver, a man who'd built and sold 2 software companies and hadn't cried in a boardroom in 15 years, knelt down in the mud in a suit that cost more than Marlene's truck, and wept into that old cat's fur like a man who'd been carrying something heavy a very long time and had finally set it down. He paid off the county fine before he left that afternoon. Within the month, he'd bought the outstanding lien himself and quietly folded it into a trust, the Piney Fork Stray Haven, deeded permanently to Marlene, fully funded, fully protected from any future ordinance in Sable County or beyond. Ferris still comes by most mornings, hauling water out of habit even though the new well runs strong. He never did apologize outright, that's not his way, but he built the shelter's second wing himself, free of charge, and calls it square. Winona finishes high school this spring. She's already been accepted into a veterinary program 2 counties over, tuition covered, a scholarship in her mother's name that Thaddeus insisted on funding. The intake notebook has grown into 6, each one in Marlene's same careful hand, name, age, temperament, a record of every soul nobody else wanted, kept safe by the one woman in Sable County who never once thought counting them was foolish. These days, if you drive the county road past dusk, you'll still see her out there, buckets in hand, 60-some names rising into the cold air like a roll call nobody else ever thought to take. Until the night it turned out to be the only thing standing between her family and the dark.